Okay, good evening everyone. We're live. It's 7:30 here in Australia. We have over 460 people joining us from across the globe tonight. And I firstly wanted to introduce myself. If you don't know me, I'm Suzy Green. I'm the CEO and founder of the Positivity Institute. I'm assuming there will be a lot of people on the webinar tonight that I have met across the globe, but I'm sure there's also a lot of people that myself and the associates haven't met. So a really, really very warm welcome to joining us tonight. We've got a jam-packed webinar presentation for you tonight that we've curated, if you like, in these particularly trying times. Because of the number of people that have registered, we're not going to be able to manage the Q&A tonight. So we've decided we're still going to encourage you to put your questions in the chat box, and we'll be responding tomorrow or the next day with a resource of Q&A and any other resources that we mentioned tonight. So we'll be following up in the next couple of days. We're really keen to also hear from you how we might be able to help you. So tonight, as I said, we've curated what we think are some of the key psychological skills that we think are really relevant and really needed right now with so many people feeling so much fear and anxiety and overwhelm. But we're also really keen to hear from you as to how we might be able to help you on an ongoing basis. So we'll also be sending out a survey to get your feedback, and really appreciate you taking the time to provide that feedback over the next couple of days. For those that don't know us, a little bit about Positivity Institute. We've been running for about eight and a half years now, and we're really passionate about creating flourishing lives and creating a flourishing world. And we've been doing that for the last 8.5 years, taking out these psychological skills to the world and encouraging people to proactively learn them for when the curveballs come. And right now we have one of the biggest curveballs that I think most of us have ever experienced in our whole lives. Unless you're, on here and you're around my parents' age, who are in their 90s, and they lived through World War II. And I know to them it seems quite similar in many ways to what we're going through at the moment. So tonight I'm going to provide a brief introduction to why positivity in particular is so important right now, more than ever. And I'm going to draw on the science. I'm going to be fairly succinct because we have around seven presentations by the senior associates, very brief, succinct presentations. But I want to start off by really building, I guess, the rationale and the scientific research to support everything that we're presenting to you tonight. Then I'm going to hand over to the senior associates. We're going to share some really simple but very practical strategies that can help you and your families, friends and colleagues manage particularly the fear and the anxiety and the overwhelm that a lot of people are experiencing right now. So the presentation tonight is called Power of Positivity in a VUCA World. This term VUCA has made its way out, particularly in the corporate sector. It's been around for a while. I actually presented at one of the global pharmaceutical companies a couple of years ago when they experienced a cyber attack, if you like, and I was brought in to do a brief presentation on why positivity was more important than ever in this VUCA world. So for those that haven't heard or come across the term before, it stands for volatile. So the rate of change, the rate and pace of change is fast or faster than we've ever experienced. So much uncertainty about what's going to happen next. And I think right now, that's probably one of the primary issues and concerns that people are feeling, just not knowing what's going to happen. Then there's the complexity when there's multiple factors. And you can see right now, particularly here in Australia, our government trying to balance the health concerns with the economic concerns, and so many stakeholders to bring in and make those decisions quite in a very agile way. And then A is ambiguous. So there's a lot of lack of clarity about what does this event mean. And I guess I've been hearing this week about, I think perhaps today, apparently today, ScoMo, our Prime Minister here in Australia, I heard was quoted as saying that it's going to be the worst year of our lives. And, you know, for some people, may not experience that at all. For some people, it may provide opportunities for growth, although having worked clinically for many years myself, I know, and I know myself from personal experience, that when you're in the eye of a storm, you absolutely can't see the growth that may come afterwards. I know that's very hard to see when you're in it, but I do know that often there is this growth. And in fact, there's a whole area of positive psychological research around post-traumatic growth, about how people actually grow through going through trauma rather than developing a post-traumatic stress disorder. So yes, very complex, very volatile, very uncertain, and very ambiguous right now. A lot of people have hit the panic button. I know myself, I've been using every psychological skill that I have in my toolkit in the last week. I've had a lot of ants, those automatic negative thoughts at 3 a.m. in the morning. I've been up writing furiously in my journal, coming up with ideas and solutions. I've been doing every one of my favorite meditation practices. And I think this is exactly what we have been encouraging people to do when we've been running these building resilience workshops over the last couple of years, is that ideally that some of these practices should form part of your everyday life, but when the curveballs come, it's the time to up the ante on some of these skills. So for example, exercise, which James Cummins is going to speak to you briefly about tonight. Often exercise is the first thing to drop when people are stressed. And in fact, it should be the very last thing, because as James will explain to you, it helps dissipate the adrenaline. It helps us to think more clearly and to manage the stress. But I do want to say firstly that fear is a very normal and appropriate human emotion to what we're going through now. And we really need to cultivate a great deal of kindness and compassion towards ourselves. And I would say a large dose of curiosity in terms of being mindful. And Eileen Doolittle is going to talk a lot about mindfulness tonight, about being an observer of our thoughts and determining in some cases whether they're helpful or perhaps not. Eric Winters will give us some great strategies as well to deal with perhaps some of those unhelpful thoughts or emotions that we might be experiencing, but they are very normal. So about a week ago, I launched my very first book for the public after teaching and publishing 20 peer-reviewed scientific articles over the last 20 years. And it's turned out to be quite timely, because the book's called The Positivity Prescription, and it contains 6 key psychological skills that I spent 20 years teaching clinical counselling and coaching clients, and that we've been teaching in our workshops for the last 8 or so years. And at the time, the media company said to us, oh, it's not good timing to launch this book. And then I explained to them that actually it's the perfect time because of what's happening. So I made this Instagram post last week. Some of you that follow me on Insta may have seen it. And I really tried to bring together some of the scientific research that sits quite separately to make some linkages. So basically, as I mentioned, fear is an appropriate response. As human beings, we are primed to look for threats in our environment for our survival. Now, in saying that, some people are super sensitive. They scan for threats in their environment. And perhaps we may say they have higher levels of pessimism, which some of the research has shown as well. Or if you've had some anxiety in the past, it's a normal response to scan and look for threats. So right now we're being bombarded by those threats. We're surrounded by them. We're experiencing this fear. We know that fear is contagious, that emotions are contagious. The more that we talk about it with our friends, in fact, great paper I picked up just this week was showing that even if we're not like expressing it verbally, if we're expressing it in our bodies, people, and again, it might even be at an unconscious level, pick up the fear and start feeling the fear in their body by noticing, observing fear in someone else's bodily responses. So there are a number of mechanisms that the researchers are looking at in terms of facial mimicry, the mirror neurons in the brain, as to how this contagion effect occurs. And I won't have time to go into that tonight, but let's just accept that it is contagious. Most of us have probably experienced that this week. We also know that there's significant decades of research to show that fear and stress has a significant impact on our psychological well-being, on our physical well-being, and on our immune functioning. So this, connection may potentially lead to the fear that we have around potentially catching the virus, if you like, if we put our immune systems at risk. Now, I'm not promising that some of these strategies will be, a cure-all for everything, but some of the papers I've been reading are saying that they should be at the very least being used to supplement medications. But some of the research is showing that they're fairly efficacious even in comparison to flu vaccines when we're looking at the flu virus. So it's certainly something to bear in mind. We also know as humans we have this negativity bias. So we're primed again to look for the things that could go wrong in our environments. And this is sort of, feeding into that priming for the threats, if you like. That will never go away. We don't want it to go away, but right now, I guess I would argue that it's very strong, and we need to balance it out with a lot of what's happening that's good in the world right now. And I'm also hearing a lot of wonderful positive stories. And I've been suggesting to people that we need to share as many positive stories as we can, because whilst bad is stronger than good, this is a classic paper by Roy Baumeister. If anyone wants it, we can actually send the paper out. I think it's on open access journals. So many research studies over the years to show that negative emotions, these negative thought processes take longer to process. Negative emotions sit with us like Velcro. They take longer to process. And so we need to balance it out with the positive emotions. So the paper suggests that because of this such negative, the strong effect of these negative emotions, that we need a proliferation of positivity. And in fact, some of you may be familiar with Dr. John Gottman's research on, master marriages versus the disaster marriages, and his research that has shown that the master marriages have a ratio of 5 positive interactions to 1 negative. So we need a lot more positivity right now to overcome a lot of the negativity that we're being bombarded with and we're experiencing. This is just one of the papers. You can see a meta-analytic study of 30 years of inquiry showing the impact of stress on the immune system, just for those that still want to, would like more of the scientific research base. And then on the flip side, out of positive psychology, we have a wonderful theory that is one of the key theories of positive psychology by Professor Barbara Fredrickson that many of you will be familiar with, that shows that positive emotions, just like negative emotions, and I won't have time to go into this because sometimes those labels are a little tricky, but positive emotions also have a very important role to play in our survival. And so right now, those positive emotions we need to be able to use to be creative, to be solution focused, to find solutions to some of these challenges that we're facing right now, to be able to build our social connections, to support each other. And again, we can send through a paper for those that are interested on that area. So much research I won't have time to go into. I've just highlighted here some of the research that's particularly relevant in the situation we're going through. So right now, if you can experience joy, even just thin slices of joy on a daily basis of, savoring a bunch of roses, which is I've had on my desk all day today, a chat, to a close family friend via Skype or Zoom. The research shows that it's going to help widen our scope of attention. When we're in fight or flight, our thinking closes down. We don't see options. We need the positivity to be able to see solutions, creative solutions to the challenges we're facing right now. In fact, a fantastic study looking at medical decision-making with surgeons found that surgeons that were induced into a positive mood state made faster and more creative and more helpful decisions than those that were induced into a negative mood state. So our medical practitioners really need this right now too. The creativity, the immune functioning, resilience to adversity, lowering levels of cortisol, which is that stress response, inflammatory responses, and improving resistance to rhinoviruses. Lots of interventions that have been scientifically studied to show that they do have an impact on the immune system. Tonight, we're going to cover off on a few of those. The model that we've developed at the Positivity Institute over the last few years is called the 6M model. So they all start with M, and luckily, very fortunately, and it came about when I was asked by a school principal if I had the key psychological skills for a senior high school student leaving the gates for the very last time, what would be those key skills? And I went away and thought about what I knew from the science and thought about what I knew as being a practitioner for many years. And I came up with these 6 skills, which are mindset, motivation, mindfulness, might, mood, and meaning. Tonight, we're going to focus in on mindfulness, mindset, and mood as the 3 that I think are particularly relevant right now. Oh, I've gone one slide too fast. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to have to bring up the slides. So I'm going to hand over right now to Ellen, who's going to take us through some breathing. Ellen Jackson. Ellen runs a fabulous podcast called the Potential Psychology Podcast, if you get a chance to subscribe. And Ellen's going to take us through some basic breathing techniques that have been shown to actually prevent a panic attack from occurring if you can practice them at the very first feelings of fear and anxiety. I'm going to search for the correct PowerPoint slides because I've accidentally brought up the wrong set, and we'll be back with you. Ellen will continue and I'll be back with you shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry that we couldn't be meeting under more positive circumstances than this evening, but I'm really glad that you've been able to join us. I am, as Susie just mentioned, going to talk just for a few minutes about managing your stress. So this comes under the mood heading in the 6M model. And I think it's fair to say, as Susie introduced you, we are all stressed to some degree at the moment. You may not be particularly cognitively aware of your stress levels. You may feel like, no, I'm coping, I'm managing. But I've had a couple of conversations in the last day or so, and it's certainly something I noticed myself. When you lie in bed at night, ready to sleep, do you notice the blood pumping around your head a little faster? Do you notice perhaps a clenched jaw? Do you notice muscle tension? It might be in your shoulders, in your neck. It might be throughout your body. And all of those are signs of stress. So you might have been busy and distracted, not necessarily noticing those during the course of the day. But once you lie in bed, once you start to pay attention to your body and what's going on, you might notice those cumulative effects of stress that have occurred as you've kind of kept busy and gone throughout your day. So, of course, some of us are going to be very cognitively aware of our stress as well. It may be both for you. So these are physical manifestations of stress, and they lead to all sorts of issues and problems, both physically and psychologically. Some of those Susie covered just now. And the sorts of things you might see, irritability, you might see short temper, you might see your moods being very close to the surface, having difficulty controlling some of that, perhaps, whether that's tears or despair or overwhelm. You might have difficulty concentrating. You might have difficulty remaining on task. These are all symptoms and signs of stress, physical and psychological signs. So I've just got a really simple strategy that you can use to calm the body and calm the mind and be able to be at your optimum so that you're able to help and assist the other people who you need to be able to help. As Susie mentioned, when your brain perceives a threat, it activates what we call our stress response system. It's also known as our sympathetic nervous system. And that's activated as a fight or flight response in order to keep us safe. It's all very natural and a desirable system. We need it in order to keep safe. But if it's activated regularly or too frequently, then that's not doing us any good physically or psychologically. The 5 deep breaths is the tool that we all have available to us. It's time efficient, it's free, it's there wherever we need it, it's entirely portable, and it activates the opposite effect. So it activates our calming or our relaxation response. And you might already do this. If you do any kind of yoga or any relaxation breathing techniques or any meditation, you'll be fully aware of this. You'll be all over it. So For you, it's just about remembering when you need it and making sure that you do it in those moments. If you're not aware of it, if you've not had any experience with this, you may not have really even paid much attention to how you breathe. So many of us breathe right up here in the top part of our chest. They're fairly shallow breaths. Sometimes if we're stressed, they might be quite short and sharp and anxious type breaths, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And that's going to keep you alive. You know, none of us are going to forget how to breathe. It's going to keep you alive, but it's not necessarily going to reduce your stress. In fact, you're in danger of increasing your stress if they become a bit too short and sharp and agitated. So the 5 deep breaths that we're talking about here are belly breaths. So we're breathing right from our deep down in our belly. So the best way to practice this, and this is your task, your little homework or your practice task now, is just to put one or both hands on your belly. And then you breathe in for a count of 4 and out for a count of 4. So this is my attempt to demonstrate while I speak, a bit challenging. It's in, 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4. And when you do that, you should be able to feel your belly rise and fall. Now, if this is new to you as a practice, it might feel weird. It might feel awkward. It might feel like you're kind of over breathing. So it does take practice, like any kind of skill, especially one that's useful for life. It takes a bit of practice, both to get a grasp on it and also to be able to kind of embed it as a habit or a skill for life. So I'll challenge you, just as I go through a couple of other little points, to practice that now while I'm talking. It's the 1 breath in and count for 4. So 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. So while you're doing that, and you should notice a calming effect. I know it's a little hard to pay attention to that and pay attention to what I'm saying at the same time, but you should actually notice that you physically become calmer. You should be able to feel the relaxation kind of starting to flow or drift over your body. And again, might not happen the first few times. It's about practice. So the other thing I really want to encourage you to do it now, try it later, try it before you go to bed, and try it throughout your day. So punctuate your day. It's a great thing to do if you're transitioning from one task to another. If you're rushing from, well, perhaps not meeting to meeting physically at the moment, but even if it's task to task or online meeting to online meeting, just allow yourself a few seconds between each of the activities that you do, even if it's moving from one task to another, to stop. Notice where the stress is in your body, because that will be different for everybody. Some of us have, I know I find that my shoulders end up around my ears when I'm stressed, and I just need to stop and pay attention, see where that is, calm it down, do your 5 deep breaths as a little punctuation, a little comma between one task and the next. And see if you can maintain that over the course of the day. See if you can really focus on the benefits that it brings you, because that will help to embed it as a habit. The other thing, so step 1 is just notice where your stress manifests. Pay attention. Step 2 is take those 5 deep breaths and notice the physical response. Once you get used to that calming effect, you'll start to get a bit addicted to it. You'll notice how much it helps. So, pay attention, take your 5 deep breaths. And the third part is just repeat. Repeat it frequently. Repeat it as often as you need to. Pass it on as a skill to others. That's a leadership challenge for you. Share it with other people and just make sure that you're looking after yourself so that you are in the best place to look after others. Thank you. I'm going to pass on to our next presenter.
Thank you, Ellen. I know for myself personally, learning abdominal breathing, deep belly breathing in my 20s has changed my life. It's such a portable technique that you can use in real time, but you do need to practice it so you can apply it in real time. I'm going to hand over to Sheena Polizzi now, who's going to talk a little bit about energy management. Thanks, Sheena. Oh,
here I am, just unmuted myself. Thanks, Suzy, and thanks, Ellen. It's good to have those few deep breaths. So we are in unprecedented times, and sorry if we could just change the slide there. Thank you. So I'm going to speak about energy management, and as you'll see, this pyramid here, this has an evidence base to it. Back in 2001, Laura and Schwartz have researched high performance athletes and how the learnings from those high performance athletes can be transferred to the workplace. Now, managing our energy at the moment is going to be something quite different to what we've ever done before. We're all facing such unique circumstances. And probably your traditional rituals and routines have pretty much been disrupted. Probably going to the gym, running out in the park, going to the beach, all those things that have contributed to building into your exercise routine and your physical capacity has probably been disrupted. As Suzy said, some people will be potentially thriving in this pressure, but many are feeling really overwhelmed. So how are we going to show up every day? You know, what are we going to do? How are we going to show up to ourselves, to our families, to our co-workers? How also can we recharge ourselves and remain hopeful in these really uncertain times? So we do need to pay attention and recognise our behaviours and our thoughts that are also energy depleting. So it's not just our physical energy, it's also our emotional, mental and spiritual energy. So this is a great little pyramid to look at, because although physical is on the bottom, and as you can see, you know, that contributes significantly to our energy. I'm not going to talk too much to that because James, the next speaker, is going to address that. However, what I do want to speak about in relation to the physical piece is the importance, and I know everybody knows this now, the importance of good nutrition, getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. These all build your energy and your immune function as well, and getting breaks throughout the day. Okay, there's some critical things, foundations of keeping us well. For those of you that are now working from home, you know, keeping some sort of timetable with working in 90 to 120 minute time slots. And so that making sure that you're rejuvenating your energy, taking a break, so that your body doesn't go into that trough. We really need to be listening to our bodies as well and observing our physical reactions. So such as, you know, yawning and hunger. And, you know, if we're noticing a lack of concentration, it's a fair sign that we need to rejuvenate. You know, while we've still got the opportunity at the moment to run around the neighbourhood, taking a walk, really encourage you to do so, because we're just not sure where this is going to go. Some of you are also likely to have children home from school now, with certainly in New South Wales and Victoria and other states in Australia where schools have been closed, and certainly overseas where schools are closed. You won't have that opportunity to go outside. So finding ways to do physical activity inside is going to be really important. So getting some new rituals around that is going to be one of the first things to consider. That will then build into your emotional capacity, because managing your emotional emotions is going to have a significant impact on your energy. Right now, we've got an influx of information, plus our fight or flight reaction, which has already been spoken about. This means we've probably got a bit of a, you know, an obsession going on with the latest news feed. If you're constantly scouring on your social media or the news, it's probably really feeding into that negative emotion, and that will be depleting you. So really try and take regular breaks from the media and other negative influences, and give yourself some space to recover. You know, if you don't allow that space, it's again likely that you will become irritated, and that's not going to be great when you are living in a enclosed space with other family members or other flatmates, housemates. So all of those things will influence the physical and the emotional. And one way to find some positive ways to build your emotional capacity is thinking about ways you can express your appreciation and gratitude. And so if you can also use this wheel of emotion, which I've just included here, so you can actually see what are ways in which you might be able to drive more happiness in your day. Perhaps in its expression of appreciation for that pretty teacup bought by a friend, or those new indoor plants you've just bought, and the joy that they bring you. On the back onto the scale with the spiritual as well. It's really important we're living into our meaning and purpose in our life. And I've spoken to many people over the last few days, and they've actually said, you know, one of the great things that has come from this is actually the opportunity to slow down. I mean, if there's anything that can come of it, this is the opportunity to reconnect with ourselves and our families, and taking the time to connect with close relatives and family friends that you may have lost touch with, and really good to be checking in on people. So there's on the next slide, thank you, is a little grid for each of you to have a look at how you might think about how you might manage your energy using those 4 things, because those 4 things will build on each other. If you can do the physical, it'll build into the emotions. If you create some new rituals around the emotions, it'll build into the mind. If you can create some new rituals around that, it'll build into a more positive spirit. So there's some things there to think about. That's a bit of a takeaway sheet, which I know that they will get out to you, and you'll have access to that. So I'm now going to hand over to the next person. I think that's James, or back to Suzy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheena. And in our 6M model, you may have noted meaning is one of the M's. It's a really important one. So I'm glad that, Sheena, you were able to tap into that. We'd love to talk more about that. But right now, it's probably coming down to the things that really matter, which often these situations really force you to recognise what are the things that really matter. So I'm going to hand over to James. James is an accredited exercise physiologist. He's one of our senior associates. He's an educator, and he's got some great tips for exercise prescriptions.
Thank you, Suzy. So I will be talking to you about common sense, but as we know, common sense is not always common practice. And given the levels of stress, tension, fatigue we're under, I just want to give a gentle reminder to bring it back to your body, this embodied cognition. If I can bring my senses back to my body, and if I can start to move my body, then that will release positive emotions. So as an exercise physiologist, we have a governing body called ESSA, and they've just released a press release of the importance of continuing our physical activity and our incidental activity in any way possible. As we know, there's plenty of evidence supporting the positive impacts that exercise has on boosting our immunity and also supporting mental health. What's really important is if you are experiencing any flu-like symptoms, that you don't exercise in a vigorous manner. In fact, when you look at exercise, we really need to bring in recovery. Recovery rates will boost energy levels and also enable us to do more exercise. So some simple resilience boosters through exercise. 1, mindfulness movement. We had a great example of our awareness of breath, but I just encourage you for awareness of your body. And another mindfulness exercise you can do is you feel your feet on the floor, your seat on the seat, on your chair, and your back on the back. And then you can just feel what's happening to your body. As long as that's not overwhelming you. If it is overwhelming you, do something to underwhelm you, which could be for your walk. Even if you're in a limited space, move the body as much as you can. Your sit to stands from the chair is great, but also if you're feeling the stress, tension, and fatigue in your muscles, really try to stretch. The yoga, the Pilates, which you're already doing. If not, here's an opportunity to try some new novel exercises. And on that point, start easy, start slow. We may have time to do this. We don't want to experience any pain or discomfort from the exercise, so just gradually ease into it. Also, I'd encourage you to think about strength, stamina. If you do have stairs at home, there's your flight, there's your stair trainer. If you do have space, enjoy the green space as much as you can and the sunlight where possible. The third point I'd like to leave with you is finding your flow. So for some of us, we might be able to revisit YouTube and Jane Fonda, or in Australia, Oz Aerobics. That might be something that can take us back. But there's plenty of YouTube exercise interventions we can have a look at it. So start safe, start small, and just gently encourage each of us to move more, find your flow, find what you love, put on that music and dance as much as you can. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I love it. I'm a big fan of Shaun T. I don't know if anyone else is on the call, but I've set myself the Shaun T 30-day challenge for the next 30 days at home. So thank you. I'm going to hand over to Eileen Dooligill now. Eileen's been working with me very closely, possibly for the last 8 or so years, and she's got a special interest in mindfulness. She's a counselling, organisational coaching psychologist. So over to you, Eileen.
Thank you, Suzy, and welcome everybody. And we're all going through such an emotional storm at the moment, and mindfulness is going to be something that's really going to help us to, I guess, get through the next few months, in addition to what we've already talked about. And mindfulness, as I'm going to talk about it, really means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So I'm sure if any of you are going through some of what we're going through here and what we're experiencing, there's a lot of thinking about what if, what if this happens, what if work, the economy slows down, etc. So that projecting into the future, and also the thinking about the past, if only I'd bought more toilet paper, or if only I'd saved more money. So, either projecting into the future or thinking into the past. And one way to really manage some of those anxious thoughts and feelings that you might be having is to just really focus on what's going on for us in the moment. And lots of people have already talked about that on the call today. So that could be just noticing what's around you in terms of, anything really that's around you, looking to see what you can see, or noticing what your body is doing. So some of those physical sensations. So as Suzy talked about, and a few others have also mentioned, we are all in this together, which makes it such an incredible situation for the world. And it's very normal and natural for us to be feeling anxious and overwhelmed. And it's what our brains have evolved to do since prehistoric times. But that doesn't mean that you have to be hijacked by some of these thoughts and feelings. So I'm going to actually take us through an ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy based mindfulness activity, but there are many more that you can be doing. And another one that I think would be really good to do would be a loving kindness meditation. So I think that either we can send out a link to a really good one, or they're pretty easy to find online, and they've got a very structured formula to them, so it's a pretty straightforward one to do. The other one that's quite a useful one to do, which I know is going to be sent out in the pack, is a mindful comma, or what I call the stoop exercise. And I'll talk about that in a moment, because what I really want to do right now is have everybody experience a mindfulness activity for themselves, given that we're all sort of sitting here and we're all probably feeling similar feelings of overwhelm and anxiety and worry. So what I'd like you to do is, if you feel comfortable, just gently let your eyes close. Take some slow, deep belly breaths. And acknowledge that there's an emotional storm showing up for you right now. And that this is a way to handle that storm, and just to calmly drop anchor. So first, just see if you can push your feet hard into the floor. So push them down. Feel the ground beneath you. Feel the muscles in your legs working to push your feet down. Sit forward in your chair. Feel the chair beneath your seat. Notice your back supporting you. And now slowly press your fingertips together. And as you do that, feel the muscles in your arms. Feel your joints in your elbows and your shoulders. Feel your arms moving slightly to push your fingertips together, all the way from your fingers to your shoulder blades. And while you're doing that, just take a moment to focus inward and acknowledge that there are feelings and thoughts here that you're struggling with. You didn't ask for this. You don't have to like it. But here it is anyway. And it's challenging. And it's difficult. And you'd like it to go away. And yet it's not. It's not going away. So silently acknowledge to yourself what type of pain or emotion this is. So for example, say to yourself, here's anxiety, or here's a feeling of worry. And now notice that as well as this emotion, there's a body around this emotion, a body that you can move and control. So notice your whole body now, your hands, your feet, your arms, your legs, and gently move them and feel them moving. Notice your muscles moving, and press your feet down again and feel the floor. So coming back to your body to feel those sensations in your body. And now also open your eyes and look around the room and notice 5 things that you can see in the room around you. And notice 3 or 4 sounds that you can hear coming from me or your own body or the room around you. And notice that we're here together. So there's something very painful and emotional here that you're struggling with. And at the same time, you can notice your body in the chair, and you can notice the room around you, and you can notice that we're here talking and working together. So that's an exercise called dropping anchor, which really asks you to notice and acknowledge your thoughts and feelings, to open up to that moment. And what that means is really just allowing those feelings and thoughts to be there without liking them or wanting them to be there, but just allowing them to be there really. You can breathe into them if that's something that you would find helpful. It is a helpful strategy. And then to come back to your body via your 5 senses, so that you're actually not getting caught up in your thoughts and feelings, but you're coming back to your physical body, to your here and now. And that's those 3 strategies are really effective ways to manage some of the really difficult thoughts and feelings that we might all be feeling and thinking over the next few months. And the stoop exercise, just very briefly, S stands for stop what you're doing and stand or sit still. T stands for take some deep breaths. O stands for observe what's going on in your body. The second O stands for open up to whatever is happening for you in the moment. And the P stands for proceed with greater awareness and effectiveness. So remembering to focus on what you can do to be effective during this time, as well as just checking in with your body throughout the day, checking in with what's going on for you, is going to be a really helpful strategy over the next few months. That's it.
Thank you so much, Eileen. I know I use Muse. I don't know if anyone has heard of it. It's like a little headband and it tracks your brain waves and your heartbeat. And I've been using it on and off, not consistently, but I've really upped the ante on that in the last week as well. But there's some great free apps out there. The ones that we recommend are usually Headspace, Number One, Giant Mind, Smiling Mind, another great Australian one. Of course, Insight Timer, and Calm is a great one. And somebody was telling me yesterday, I can't remember, there's some incredibly beautiful calm stories that are told by some famous people on there as well that will certainly put you to sleep if you're looking to head to sleep as well. So thanks so much, Eileen. I'm going to just hand to Lisa Baker, who's down in Melbourne in Victoria. She's an early educator and she's completed the Masters of Applied Positive Psych and has a particular interest in wellbeing literacy and the power of language. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Susie, and thanks everybody. Just bouncing off, I guess, a lot of what we've already heard, and I particularly appreciate the comment just now about proceed with greater awareness. While we're being mindful of our breathing and our mood and our energy management and exercise, I think all of these things are great to enable us to perhaps try and put our own oxygen mask on first before we're called to help other people, which we're going to be doing a lot of at the moment. I just want to take a couple of minutes to draw your attention to our language and to the power of our words. We know that we use our language to transport our thoughts to other people, to process information, to share information, and really to construct meaning in our lives. And we're doing a lot of meaning construction at the moment in this new sort of VUCA world. In fact, our words create our worlds, and our reality and our relationships are really formed through our language. So I think it's an important thing to perhaps proceed with greater awareness at the moment in regards to our language, because our language is really an important lever for our flourishing as well. What we say, how we say it, our intention behind our communication can all impact how we're feeling and our flourishing. So I guess particularly at the moment in our increasingly VUCA world, as Susie spoke about at the start, I wonder if there are any instances where you feel that you're impacted by the kind of language that you're hearing. The narrative at the moment about being in a war or in a fight, that we're at the front line of combat with an enemy. How do you feel when you hear that on the television or read that online? I guess I'd ask you to start to tune in to how this might be affecting you. And also, what about social distancing? How do you feel when you hear that? We've all really quickly added this new phrase to our language, but I know I feel some sort of fear and a bit of pending isolation when I keep hearing this over and over, social distancing, social distancing. What we're really meaning is physical distancing. Keep some space between us, but stay connected. So I guess I'd encourage you to be mindful of how the language around you in our current situation is affecting you. Be conscious and tune into your body and your feelings when you're hearing this language. Take notice, how is this language that I'm immersed in at the moment, how is it affecting me? And change the language if you can. Think about the words that you choose and the language that you use. Let's talk about physical distancing, but social connection rather than social distancing. So subtle changes in our language can actually help us to flourish. We can develop a literacy around well-being with the mindful use of our language. When you have all of this information and advice around you, I just ask you to think, is this language helping me? Or can I reframe some of what I'm hearing and some of what I'm telling myself too? I offer you this as a provocation. How can the words I use create a more positive and a more compassionate world? How can my language create social connection even while I'm physically distant? Thanks, Susie.
I love that, Lisa. And it really taps into a mindfulness, which Eileen covered, around being aware of the language that we're using, the words that are coming out of our mouths, and also our mindsets, which we're moving into now. So we've covered off on a little bit about mood, a little bit about mindfulness, and now mindset, which is, I think, where most people are really struggling because they're having a flurry of these automatic negative thoughts, which, you know, are fairly normal in stressful situations. We all experience them, but right now I know for myself that I've had more than I would normally have too. So we were meant to have Dr. Sally Gray join us tonight, but she's been unable to connect. So I'm just going to speak really briefly on cognitive behavioural techniques, and then I'm going to hand over to Eric Winters, who's an expert in ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, or training as it's known. So for those of you that do know, but I'm sure there's still a lot of people on the call that may not know, cognitive behavioural therapy or training, cognitive behavioural therapy in particular, has been our primary therapeutic approach as psychologists for decades. It's been our bread and butter of helping people deal with anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, even some psychotic disorders, if you like. And it's been found to be highly effective for most people, not for everybody. And very simply, it helps us see the connections between our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviours. And even that simple recognition for many people is enough to, I guess, gain some mindfulness of that and decide whether the thoughts that they're having, the language that they're speaking, as Lisa said, is helpful or unhelpful. A lot of these we call ants, the automatic negative thoughts. At their very worst, they can be irrational, where there's actually no evidence to support them. And I would really encourage you right now to be like a detective or a scientist and look for the signs. And in fact, this is what the Australian Psychological Society is actually recommending right now. So they had put out a tip sheet about a week ago, which we'll also share with you. And some of the questions that they've suggested that we ask ourselves are, am I getting ahead of myself? Assuming something bad will happen when I really don't know the outcome. And look, right now, this is a really hard one because every day we're getting more information and updates, things we thought that weren't applicable, we're now finding may be applicable. So the suggestion would be to look to those credible sources that you can trust. There's a lot of misinformation out there right now, so make sure you go to credible sources for updates and current information. I like this question. Am I overestimating how bad the consequences will be? I mean, right now, they're suggesting it's fairly mild for most people, but obviously we want to bear in mind the impact that we have by going out into the community and potentially spreading it to those that are immunocompromised or at risk as well. This one is possibly the most powerful question. Am I underestimating my ability to cope? And often we find ourselves, our minds racing at 3 a.m. in the morning. Oh my God, I don't think I can handle this. When in fact, there are many, many stories, and I'm sure many, many people in your lives, or perhaps yourself, where you have gone through significant traumas, challenges, and you have got through it. You've found the resources externally to support you through connections, family, friends, and you've been able to draw on inner resources that you didn't even know that you had. This is a wonderful time to be looking to our strengths. We haven't got time to talk about that tonight, but you might like to go to the VIA Institute and take a free character strengths assessment and look at what are your top strengths that you might be able to draw on right now, and which ones might you be able to develop through this time. I'm going to hand over to Eric. We are likely to run a little bit over time, but I really would prefer that Eric went through this because this only came across my desk last week from Dr. Russ Harris, who's very well known in ACT, and I think it's a very practical tool. So thank you so much, Eric. I have been made aware that we have lost one of the slides, so I'm hoping Eric can use his psychological flexibility to deal with that tonight on the call. Thanks, Eric.
You are welcome. Good evening, everyone. What a pleasure it is to be here tonight talking about something that I think is quite important. And yes, Suzy, I'll raise a secret finger when I'd like you to page forward. That would be terrific if you can do that later on. Thanks very much. So I'd like to make clear right at the start that this, what I'm about to share is an approach created by Russ Harris. And it's an approach to responding effectively to the corona crisis, but also any other challenges that we face in our life. So I had a good chat with Russ this weekend, and after we'd exchanged critical Netflix recommendations with each other, I asked him about this model, and he agreed kindly that we could share with you the model in a 12-page PDF. So that'll be shared afterwards. So as we step through the face COVID model, you don't have to make notes. Go ahead if you'd like to, but you will have a document at the end which describes everything. So what we're experiencing now, as we've heard before, is unprecedented. And the model I'm about to share, I think rather nicely ties together a lot of the things you've been hearing from the other associates tonight. The one thing that's going to make the biggest difference to your ability and my ability to respond effectively is the first step, and that is to focus. And what to focus on? Focus on what is within your control. I don't know if you, like me, find yourself glued to the TV or the radio now. It seems very compelling. What's happening with the economy? I can't control it, but it seems compelling, somehow necessary that I should know. What's happening in Italy feels compelling. I can't control it. How long is this going to last? I can't control that. When we focus on what's not within our control, we're like rabbits staring at a headlight bearing down on us. We're paralyzed. Focusing on what is not within our control is disabling. It makes us feel helpless and hopeless. So the most important thing that we need to do is instead redirect our attention towards what we can do. And what we can do is decide what actions we will take. That's what's within our control. But before we're going to be able to do that, we first need to do what Eileen called dropping anchor. Now, when a storm is passing through a harbour, if the boats want to avoid bashing into each other and crashing into walls, what they do is they drop anchor. It doesn't make the storm go away, but it does mean that they can be more stable while the storm is passing. And we need to do the same thing. So we can see at the top left of this screen, the face COVID model. We're going to step through each of those letters. And as you see, we're going to begin with acknowledge. And the first three letters, this A, C, and E, after focus, are about dropping anchor. And as Eileen said, we first need to acknowledge the thoughts and the feelings that we are having. Not try to push them away, not to put a brave face on things and hold them down, but actually to recognize, yeah, actually, you know what? I am having thoughts that I might get sick. I am noticing that I'm having the experience of stress. Yeah, or I'm telling myself the story again that this is going to last forever. First step is simply to acknowledge actually what's going on the inside. That takes us on to the C. The C is to come back into our body. And as Eileen described, we can do that very simply, perhaps just by pressing our feet into the ground and noticing what that feels like. Pushing our fingers together and noticing what that feels like. Or perhaps taking some slow breaths and noticing what that feels like. It's the noticing what it feels like that brings our attention out of this virtual reality and back into what's real in our bodies. It's grounding. The third step in dropping anchor is the E. And in the E, we actually engage in what we're doing. And what this means here is we actually notice the real world, not the virtual world in our head, the real world around us. As Eileen said, we could notice perhaps 5 things in the room that we could see. Perhaps name them as we go around. We bring our attention to what's real and bring our attention to what we're actually doing now. Those first 3 steps of dropping anchor is what allows us to choose what we do next. If we don't drop anchor and we simply try hard to do the right thing, we'll just get washed away in our emotional storm. After dropping anchor, we restore a greater degree of choice about how we'll actually show up. So we now move on to the C in the model. Now we've dropped anchor, we can take committed action. And what committed action means in this model is to do what matters. What really matters now? It may be taking care of ourselves, maybe looking after ourselves. It may be taking care of somebody else. It may be getting more information. But the action, we make a conscious decision to take action to do what is important. The next step is the O. And in the O, what we're doing is opening up, that's to say, making space for difficult thoughts and feelings, which are going to accompany us as we do what's difficult. It's normal to feel anxious and worried as we do what's important. Those thoughts and feelings might not go away, but they don't have to be center stage. We can take them with us as we engage in important actions, doing the things that really matter most, which takes us quite nicely to the V. The V is about values. When we talk about values, what we really mean is what matters to you. How do you really want to show up in the face of this crisis? How would you like to behave in such a way that you can look back in years to come and say, actually, I'm content, I'm pleased, I can be justifiably proud of actually how I showed up, even though it was really hard. Now, there isn't a prescribed correct list of values, of course, but common values might include kindness or caring, or perhaps being honest, or showing courage, perhaps. So the question is, what really matters to me? And what would that look like if I was to, throughout the day, engage with doing the things that matter most? This takes us on to the I in the Face COVID model. And the I is, what we really need to do now is also identify external resources. Where can we get accurate information about what's going on? Who can help us? Apart from the Positivity Institute, what other sources of information, perhaps family or friends, can provide resources to help us out? How can we help each other during this time? This is no time to be trying to do everything by ourselves. It's a time for each of us to contribute to each other. So identify which resources can help you. Now, the next slide, if we had it, the D would say disinfect and distance. Now, I never thought I'd learned so much about hand washing as I have over the last couple of weeks. But today I learned something I didn't know. I didn't think there was anything left, but it turns out that the temperature of the water you use doesn't make any difference whatsoever. So yes, we need to disinfect by washing our hands well, 20 seconds minimum. It doesn't matter about the temperature of the water, you use soap. And then afterwards, apparently it's also worthwhile after drying to moisturize. That also protects the skin. And the other D in the final part of this Face COVID model is distance. As we heard earlier, it's physical distancing we're talking about. Now, in the press, I hear that we're supposed to have, is it 4 square meters? I can't think in terms of square meters, but I can think in terms of arm lengths. Apparently, they want to keep 2 arm lengths away from people. So there we have it, the COVID model, the Face COVID model. And there goes my 10-minute timer telling me that my time is up and I've got to hand back to Suzy. Suzy.
Thank you so much, Eric. That's fabulous. And I absolutely agree. Russ has created a fantastic approach here, that's very practical. And when it comes to values, that forms a really core part of the work that we do. We do have a free values list, which we'll pass on as part of the resources. We're also in the final stages of producing some values cards at the moment too. I just wanted to briefly wrap up, and I guess I'm sitting here thinking that the presentation or the webinar was entitled, you know, positivity, the power of positivity. And some of you may be thinking, you haven't really been talking a lot about, I guess, positivity. And I really want to challenge some of those beliefs, which still exist in positive psychology. And I still hear them, which is very frustrating for me as a positive psychologist, because positive psychology is not all about being positive and happy all the time. And I usually tell people they will lock you up if you are. Let me assure you of that. In fact, positive psychology and positivity for me encompasses the full range of human emotions. And right now, some of those emotions which we historically would have labelled negative, like fear and anger and sadness, as I said before, are quite appropriate and, you know, normal in the circumstances. But we do need these skills, and I think ACT is a very practical, has a practical set of skills. Could highly recommend Russ's book, The Happiness Trap. I'm also aware, if you go to his Facebook or website, that they're making their app. They have an app available at 50% off at the moment, Eric, I'm fairly sure. So we need these strategies to manage the full range of human emotions. But that doesn't mean that we can't simultaneously or within the period of a day also proactively find ways to create joy. So for myself personally, I might have waves. If I turn the television on, and as Eric said, you get like a, you know, my heart starts thumping when I look at it. It's got worse. It's got far worse than what I thought. That doesn't mean that I don't then go on, turn that off and spend some time savouring time with my family or doing some cooking or baking, even though cooking is certainly not one of my strengths. So it doesn't have to be black and white. In fact, for me, positivity and I guess our well-being is much more dialectical in nature. It needs to encompass both the light side and the dark side, the positive and the negative. But some of the strategies that you could use right now would be gratitude exercises. And when you're in these sorts of circumstances, it really does come down to the things that matter. So perhaps it's spending time with my family that I don't normally get to do. I had lunch with my son today, who is normally at work. So it was a precious opportunity. So gratitude exercises, kindness. I'm hearing wonderful stories of people setting up WhatsApp groups, delivering care packs to others. Some wonderful ways that we can enact kindness right now. Savouring is a scientific phenomena where we bring our mindful attention to our sensory pleasures. So smell of baking or of some roses, or, you know, really savouring tastes, smells, sounds. So there are a range of, I guess, mood boosting, positive mood boosting strategies, which we'll also send through, that you can simultaneously inject into your daily routines. So I hope that's been really helpful tonight. Tonight, I may not have said at the beginning, but tonight, as someone else said, is about putting your own oxygen mask on first. We have a saying that we use, which is when we're teaching, particularly in the education sector, but also in the organisational sector. So it's learn it, live it yourself first before teaching it and then embedding it in your school or organisation. If you're a leader, it would be learn it, live it, lead it. But first and foremost, you need to put your oxygen mask on first. So tonight was very much about providing with some of the strategies to help yourself, so then you can help others around you. So we will be following up. We'll have collated all of the questions and comments, and we'll get back to you as promised in the next couple of days with resources. Love you to grab a copy of my book. I've had some fantastic feedback on it. So I hope you do find that helpful as well. And we will be following up with the slides, the resources, as I mentioned. We're also going to send out the flourishing scale, which would give you a very brief snapshot of how you're functioning right now. And please feel free to follow us up if you need further support. We'll send out the Positivity Practices Diary Card, which actually lists a whole lot of positive mood boosting strategies that you can engage. And as I mentioned, we'll follow up with an email to seek your feedback about how we may best be able to help you. So I hope that's been helpful. We'll also be launching some new virtual services this week. We've offered virtual coaching for a very long time, but we'll be offering a very special, unique service later this week, and we'll also be launching our Pi virtual learning platform later in the week as well, with a range of topics where we can go a little bit deeper than what we have tonight. So I'm aware that there's still a stack of people on the call. I've never seen this in a webinar before, whereas so many people have signed up and so many have stayed on for the full course. Thank you so much wherever you are across the globe. Thank you to all the presenters. Thank you to the admin team. Stay safe, stay calm, and most importantly, stay positive. Thank you so much, and look forward to connecting in time to come. Good night, everyone. Bye.